Learn English through story. Princess and Her Maid.
Once upon a time, there was a queen who had only one beautiful daughter. She loved the girl very much. At last, the day came for the princess to go far away and marry a prince. The queen was sad to say goodbye. She gave her daughter some beautiful dresses, a gold cup, and many other things. She gave her a magic horse. It was a white horse, and it could talk.
I love this horse, Mother. I will call it Falada,
The princess said. And the queen gave her daughter a maid to ride with her. Then the queen made 3 drops of blood fall onto a handkerchief.
Take this.
She said to her daughter.
It will help you. It will make you strong. Now goodbye, daughter, and be happy.
The princess took the handkerchief with the 3 drops of blood. She put it inside her dress.
Goodbye, Mother. Thank you for everything.
The queen watched them ride away down the long hill. It was a very hot day. Soon the princess was thirsty. They were near a stream, and so she asked her maid.
Maid, please will you get me a drink of water? In my gold cup?
But the maid said angrily,
No, I will not. You get off your horse and get it. I will not be your maid.
The princess did not know what to say. So she got off her horse and went to the stream and drank. Then they rode on, but the sun was warm, and later she asked again.
Maid, please will you get me a drink of water? In my gold cup?
And again the maid said angrily,
No, I will not. You get off your horse and get it. I will not be your maid.
The princess did not know what to say. So she got off her horse and went to the stream and drank. But this time the handkerchief fell into the water,
Ah, that's good.
thought the maid.
There is no one here, and now she has nothing to help her.
So she said to the princess,
Take off that dress and give it to me. You can wear my gray one. Be quick now, or I will kill you, and I will have Falada. I'm going to be the princess. I am going to be the bride. And you are going to be my maid.
So they rode on. The maid rode in front on Falada. The princess rode behind her on the old gray horse. In the evening they arrived at the castle. The king and his son, the prince, came to meet them.
How do you do, princess?
Said the king to the maid.
This is my son, the prince.
The real princess was left outside, but the king saw her.
Who is that girl?
He thought.
She has a beautiful face. Who are you?
Asked the king.
I came here as a maid.
The real princess answered.
But you have many maids, and you do not need me.
I can find some work for you. You can be a goose girl.
Said the king.
Come with me.
He took her to a little house near the castle gate.
This is Kirsten's house.
he said.
She looks after the geese. Kirsten, come here. Here's a nice girl to help you. Give her some food and a bed, please.
That night, there was a big dinner at the castle.
This princess is going to be my son's bride.
Said the king.
They will marry in 3 weeks.
The maid looked at all the people and smiled. Later that night, she spoke to the prince.
I have something to tell you.
She said,
That white horse, Falada, is a bad horse. It's mad. You must kill it.
she was afraid because Falada could talk.
Yes, my bride.
Said the prince.
If you want that, I will tell my men to take it away.
The real princess heard about this. She had 1 gold coin. She ran to the men and said,
Take this gold coin. Do something for me. Do you see this dead horse? Put this horse's head by the big castle gate.
What?
they said.
That's a mad idea. Why?
Because I loved that horse.
She said,
I want to see its face.
the men like her, so they took the gold coin. And they put Falada's head by the castle gate. Every day, Kirsten took the geese out to the meadow, and the real princess went with her. They walked through the castle gate, and every day the real princess spoke to Falada's head.
Falada, my horse, do you know me?
Yes, princess.
The head answered.
You are the true bride.
Kirsten did not like it. She thought it was very strange. Every day, the real princess brushed her long gold hair. And Kirsten always said,
Give me some of your hair. Oh, come on. Cut some off and give it to me.
and the real princess always said,
No, Kirsten. Stop it.
But Kirsten wouldn't stop it, so the real princess had to sing to the wind. She sighed.
Blow her stones and blow it over there, so I have time to brush my hair. Blow her stones head.
Then a wind came and blew Kirsten's head off. Kirsten had to run over the meadow. Then the real princess had time to brush her hair. All this made Kirsten angry.
You're strange.
She said to the princess,
Who are you? You talk to the wind. You talk to a dead horse's head. You're mad. You're a mad girl. I'm going to tell the king about you.
So Kirsten went to the king and said,
Listen, that girl is mad. I don't want to work with her again. Every day, she talks to a dead horse's head, and it talks back to her, and she sings to the wind. She asks the wind to blow my hat off. I have to run all over the meadow.
said the king.
I want to come and see this.
So, the next day, the king hid and watched, and he saw that it was true. The king heard the real princess speak to Falada's head.
Falada, my horse. Do you know me?
Yes, Princess, you are the true bride.
And, in the meadow, the king heard her sing to the wind. She sighed.
Though her stones head, though it's over there, so I have time to brush my hair. The Kirsten's head.
He saw Kirsten's hat blow off, and he saw her run all over the meadow. That evening, the king said,
Who are you? I watched you today. I saw some very strange things. What is your story?
Oh, I cannot tell you my story. She will kill me if I tell you anything,
answered the princess. The king thought. Then he said,
I see. You are too afraid to tell me. You can't tell me. All right. I will go out of the room, and you can tell your story to this old cupboard.
The princess needed to speak, so she got inside the old cupboard. It was dark, but it was warm, and in the dark she told her story. The king listened through a hole in the wall. He heard all she said.
I am the real princess, the true bride. My maid is going to marry the prince. She took my dress. She took my horse. Falada. She rode it here. She made me ride behind her. I have no one to help me. She will kill me if I tell anyone.
Then the king said,
Do not be afraid. Come with me. It is time to make everything right.
The king found the prince and all the people in the castle.
Now,
he said,
listen carefully and do not say a word.
Then he told them about the real princess, and they were happy. They could see that she was beautiful and good. That night the true bride sat next to the prince. Her maid sat on his other side and did not know her. After dinner, the king spoke to everybody.
Listen, I have a story to tell you all. Once there was a princess who had a maid. That princess had to ride far away to marry a prince. And the maid went with her, but on the way the maid said,
Give me your dress and give me your horse, or I will kill you. I am going to be the princess now, and I am going to marry the prince.
Then the king went up to the maid and said,
Tell me what you think about this.
And she answered,
That's really bad. Put that bad maid on a horse, a mad, bad horse. And let the mad, bad horse throw her into the sea.
Right,
said the king.
Then this is what happened to you.
So the maid had to ride a mad, bad horse, and it threw her into the sea. Then the prince married the real princess, the true bride, and they were very happy.
Thank you for staying with us. Don't forget to subscribe the channel for more interesting stories. See you next time.
Welcome back to my channel. Hope you have a great day. Today I'm going to tell you an interesting story. The story is about Tildy's moment. Who is Tildy? Please don't leave the screen. Let me begin this interesting story right away. Tildy's moment.
Bogle's Family Restaurant on 8th Avenue is not a famous place, but if you need a large, cheap meal, then Bogle's is the place for you. There are 12 tables in the room, 6 on each side. Bogle himself sits at the desk, by the door, and takes the money. There are also 2 waitresses and a voice. The voice comes from the kitchen. At the time of my story, one of the waitresses was called Eileen. She was tall, beautiful, and full of life. The name of the other waitress was Tildy. She was small, fat, and was not beautiful. Most of the people who came to eat at Bogle's were men, and they loved the beautiful Eileen. They were happy to wait a long time for their meals because they could look at her. Eileen knew how to hold a conversation with 12 people and work hard at the same time. And all the men wanted to take Eileen dancing or give her presents. One gave her a gold ring, and one gave her a little dog. And poor Tildy. In the busy, noisy restaurant, men's eyes did not follow Tildy. Nobody laughed and talked with her. Nobody asked her to go dancing, and nobody gave her presents. She was a good waitress, but when she stood by the tables, the men looked round her to see Eileen. But Tildy was happy to work with no thanks. She was happy to see the men with Eileen. She was happy to know that the men loved Eileen. She was Eileen's friend, but deep inside, she too wanted a man to love her. Tildy listened to all Eileen's stories. One day, Eileen came in with a black eye. A man hit her because she did not want to kiss him.
How wonderful to have a black eye. For love.
Tildy thought.
Wow.
One of the men who came to Bogle's was a young man called Mr. Cedars. He was a small, thin man, and he worked in an office. He knew that Eileen was not interested in him, so he sat at one Tildy's tables, said nothing, and ate his fish. One day when Mr. Cedars came in for his meal, he drank too much beer. He finished his fish, got up, put his arm round Tildy, kissed her loudly, and walked out of the restaurant. For a few seconds, Tildy just stood there. Then, Eileen said to her,
Why, Tildy, you bad girl, I must watch you. I don't want to lose my men to you.
Suddenly Tildy's world changed. She understood now that men could like her and want her as much as Eileen. She, Tildy, could have a love life too. Her eyes were bright, and her face was pink. She wanted to tell everybody her secret. When the restaurant was quiet, she went and stood by Bogle's desk.
Do you know what a man in the restaurant did to me today?
She said.
He put his arm round me, and he kissed me.
Really?
Bogle answered.
This was good for business. Next week, you'll get $1 a week more.
And when, in the evening, the restaurant was busy again, Tildy put down the food on the tables and said quietly,
Do you know what a man in the restaurant did to me today? He put his arm round me and kissed me.
Some of the men in the restaurant were surprised. Some of them said, "Well done." Men began to smile and say nice things to her. Tildy was very happy. Love was now possible in her gray life. For 2 days, Mr. Cedars did not come again, and in that time, Tildy was a different woman. She wore bright clothes, did her hair differently, and she looked taller and thinner. Now, she was a real woman, because someone loved her. She felt excited and a little afraid. What would Mr. Cedars do the next time he came in? At 4 o'clock in the afternoon of the third day, Mr. Cedars came in. There were no people at the tables, and Eileen and Tildy were working at the back of the restaurant. Mr. Cedars walked up to them. Tildy looked at him, and she could not speak. Mr. Cedars's face was very red, and he looked uncomfortable.
Miss Tildy,
he said,
I want to say that I'm sorry for what I did to you a few days ago. It was a drink, you see. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm very sorry.
And Mr. Cedars left. But Tildy ran into the kitchen, and she began to cry. She could not stop crying. She was no longer beautiful. No man loved her. No man wanted her. The kiss meant nothing to Mr. Cedars. Tildy did not like him very much, but the kiss was important to her, and now there was nothing. But she still had her friend, and Eileen put her arm round Tildy. Eileen did not really understand, but she said,
Don't be unhappy, Tildy. That little Cedars has got a face like a dead potato. A real man never says sorry.
Thank you for staying with us. Don't forget to subscribe the channel for more interesting stories. See you next time.
The Christmas presents.
This was the story of two young people who were very much in love.
$1.87. That was all. Every day, when she went to the shops, she spent very little money. She bought the cheapest meat, the cheapest vegetables. And when she was tired, she still walked round and round the shops to find the cheapest food. She saved every cent possible. Delia counted the money again. There was no mistake. $1.87. That was all. And the next day was Christmas. She couldn't do anything about it. she could only sit down and cry. So she sat there in the poor room and she cried. Delia lived in this poor little room in New York with her husband, James Dillingham Young. They also had a bedroom and a kitchen and a bathroom, all poor little rooms. James Dillingham Young was lucky because he had a job, but it was not a good job. These rooms took most of his money. Delia tried to find work, but times were bad and there was no work for her. But when Mr. James Dillingham Young came home to his rooms, Mrs. James Dillingham Young called him Jim and put her arms round him, and that was good. Delia stopped crying and she washed her face. She stood by the window and looked out at a gray cat on a gray wall in the gray road. Tomorrow was Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 to buy Jim a Christmas present. Her Jim. She wants very much to buy him something really fine, something to show how much she loved him. Suddenly, Delia turned round and ran over to look in the glass on the wall. Her eyes were bright. Now, the James Dillingham Youngs had two very special things. One was Jim's gold watch. It once belonged to his father, and before that, to his grandfather. The other special thing was Delia's hair. Quickly, Delia let down her beautiful long hair. It fell down her back, and it was almost like a coat around her. Then she put her hair up again, quickly, for a second or two. She stood still and cried a little. Then she put on her old brown coat and her old brown hat, turned and left the room. She went downstairs and out into the road, and her eyes were bright. She walked along by the shops and stopped when she came to a door with Madame Eloise hair on it. Inside there was a fat woman. She did not look like an Eloise. Quickly, Delia let down her beautiful long hair.
Will you buy my hair?
Delia asked.
I buy hair.
Madame replied.
Take your hat off then and show me your hair.
The beautiful brown hair fell down.
$20.
Madame said, and she touched the hair with her hand.
Quick, cut it off. Give me the money.
Delia said. The next 2 hours went quickly. Delia was happy because she was looking round the shops for Jim's present. At last she found it. It was a gold chain for the watch. Jim loved his watch, but it had no chain. When Delia saw this gold chain, she knew immediately that it was right for Jim. She must have it. The shop took $21 from her for it, and she hurried home with the 87 cents. When she arrived there, she looked at her very short hair in the glass.
What can I do with it?
She thought. For the next half an hour, she was very busy. Then she looked again in the glass. Her hair was now in very small curls all over her head.
Oh dear.
I look like a schoolgirl.
She said to herself.
What's Jim going to say when he sees me?
At 7 o'clock, the dinner was nearly ready, and Delia was waiting.
Oh, I hope he thinks that I'm still beautiful.
She thought.
Oh dear.
Said Delia.
What's Jim going to say when he sees me?
The door opened and Jim came in and closed it. He looked very thin and he needed a new coat. His eyes were on Delia. She could not understand the look on his face, and she was afraid. He was not angry or surprised. He just watched her with that strange look on his face. Delia ran to him.
Jim.
She cried.
Don't look at me like that. I sold my hair because I wanted to give you a present. It will soon be long again. I had to do it. Jim, Say Happy Christmas, please. I have a wonderful present for you.
You've cut off your hair?
Asked Jim.
Yes, I cut it off and sold it.
Delia said.
But don't you love me anymore? Jim, I'm still me.
Jim looked around the room.
You say your hair has gone?
He said, almost stupidly.
Yes. I told you, because I love you. Shall I get the dinner now, Jim?
Suddenly, Jim put his arms round his Delia. Then, he took something from his pocket and put it on the table.
I love you, Delia.
He said.
It doesn't matter if your hair is short or long. But if you open that, you'll see why I was unhappy at first.
Excited, Delia pulled off the paper. Then she gave a little scream of happiness. But a second later, there were cries of unhappiness. Because there were the combs for her beautiful hair. When she first saw these combs in the shop window, she wanted them. They were beautiful combs, expensive combs, and now they were her combs. But she no longer had her hair. Delia picked them up and held them. Her eyes were full of love.
But my hair will soon be long again, Jim.
And then Delia remembered. She jumped up and cried.
Oh.
She ran to get Jim's beautiful present, and she held it out to him. Delia gave a little scream of happiness.
Isn't lovely, Jim? I looked everywhere for it. Now, you'll want to look at your watch 100 times a day. Give it to me. Give me your watch, Jim. Let's see it, with its new chain.
But Jim did not do this. He sat down, put his hands behind his head, and he smiled. And this was the story of two young people who were very much in love.
Please subscribe my channel for more interesting stories.
Hi, my friends. Today I'll tell you an interesting story. Hope you enjoy it. Don't forget to subscribe the channel for more amazing stories. Thank you.
A walk in amnesia. That morning, my wife and I said our usual goodbyes. she left her second cup of tea and she followed me to the front door. She did this every day. She took from my coat a hair which was not there, and she told me to be careful. She always did this. I closed the door and she went back to her tea. I am a lawyer and I work very hard. My friend, Dr. Volney, told me not to work so hard.
You'll be ill.
He said,
A lot of people who work too hard get very tired and suddenly they forget who they are. They can't remember anything. It's called amnesia. You need a chance and a rest.
But I do rest. I replied. On Thursday nights, my wife and I play a game of cards, and on Sundays, she reads me her weekly letter from her mother.
That morning, when I was walking to work, I thought about Dr. Volney's words.
I was feeling very well and pleased with life. When I woke up, I was on a train and feeling very uncomfortable after a long sleep. I sat back in my seat and I tried to think. After a long time, I said to myself, I must have a name. I looked in my pockets. No letter, no papers, nothing with my name on. But I found $3,000. I must be someone, I thought. The train was crowded with men who were all very friendly. One of them came and sat next to me.
Hi. My name's R.P. Boulder. Boulder and Son from Missouri. You're going to the meeting in New York, of course. What's your name?
I had to reply to him, so I said quickly, Edward Pinkhammer from Carnopolis, Kansas. He was reading a newspaper, but every few minutes he looked up from it to talk to me. I understand from his conversation that he was a druggist, and he thought that I was a druggist too. Are all these men druggists? I asked.
Yes, they are.
He answered,
Like us, they're all going to the yearly meeting in New York.
After a time, he held out his newspaper to me.
Look at that.
He said,
Here's another of those men who run away and then say that they have forgotten who they are. A man gets tired of his business and his family, and he wants to have a good time. He goes away somewhere, and when they find him, he says that he doesn't know who he is, and that he can't remember anything.
I found $3,000 in my pocket. I took the paper and read this. Denver, June 12th, Thelwyn C. Belford, an important lawyer in the town, left home 3 days ago and has not come back. Just before he left, he took out a lot of money from his bank. Nobody has seen him since that day. He is a quiet man who enjoys his work and is happily married. But Mr. Belford works very hard, and it is possible that he has amnesia. But sometimes people do forget who they are, Mr. Boulder. I said,
Oh, come on.
Mr. Boulder answered,
It's not true, you know. These men. just want something more exciting in their lives. Another woman, perhaps. Something different.
We arrived in New York at about 10 o'clock at night. I took a taxi to a hotel and I wrote the name Edward Pinkhammer in the hotel book. Suddenly, I felt wild and happy. I was free. A man without a name can do anything. The young man behind the desk at the hotel looked at me a little strangely. I had no suitcase. I'm here for the druggist's meeting.
I said.
My suitcase is lost. I took out some money and gave it to him. The next day I bought a suitcase and some clothes and I began to live the life of Edward Pinkhammer. I didn't try to remember who or what I was. The next few days in Manhattan were wonderful. The theaters, the gardens, the music, the restaurants, the nightlife, and the beautiful girls. And during this time, I learned something very important. If you want to be happy, you must be free. Sometimes I went to quiet, expensive restaurants with soft music. Sometimes I went on the river in boats full of noisy young men and their girlfriends. And then there was Broadway with its theaters and bright lights. The next few days in Manhattan were wonderful. One afternoon, I was going back into my hotel when a fat man came and stood in front of me.
Hello, Belford.
He cried loudly.
What are you doing in New York? Is Mrs. B with you?
I'm sorry, but you're making a mistake, sir. I said coldly. My name is Pinkhammer. Please, excuse me. The man moved away in surprise, and I walked over to the desk. Behind me, the man said something about a telephone. Give me my bill, I said to the man behind the desk, and bring down my suitcase in half an hour. That afternoon, I moved to a quiet little hotel on Fifth Avenue. One afternoon, in one of my favorite restaurants on Broadway, I was going to my table when somebody pulled my arm.
Mr. Belford.
A sweet voice cried. I turned quickly and saw a woman who was sitting alone. She was about 30, and she had very beautiful eyes.
How can you walk past me like that?
She said.
Didn't you know me?
I sat down at her table. Her hair was a beautiful red, gold color. Are you sure you know me? I asked.
No.
She smiled.
I never really knew you.
Well, my name is Edward Pinkhammer, I said. And I'm from Kansas.
So, you haven't brought Mrs. Belford with you, then?
She said, and she laughed.
You haven't changed much in 15 years. Elwyn.
Her wonderful eyes looked carefully at my face.
No,
She said quietly.
you haven't forgotten. I told you that. You could never forget.
You haven't changed much in 15 years. Elwyn.
She said, she laughed.
Did you know that I married 6 months? After you did?
It was in all newspapers.
She was silent for a minute. Then she looked up at me again.
Tell me one thing, Elwin.
She said softly,
Since that night, 15 years ago, can you touch, smell, or look at white roses and not think of me?
I can only say that I don't remember any of this. I said carefully, I'm very sorry. I tried to look away from her. She smiles and stood up to leave. Then she held out her hand to me, and I took it for a second.
Oh yes, you remember.
She said with a sweet, unhappy smile.
Goodbye, Elwin Belford.
That night, I went to the theater, and when I returned to my hotel, a quiet man in dark clothes was waiting for me.
Mr. Pinkham,
He said,
can I speak with you for a minute? There's a room here.
I followed him into a small room. A man and a woman were there. The woman was still beautiful, but her face was unhappy and tired. I liked everything about her. The man, who was about 40, came to meet me.
Belford,
He said,
I'm happy to see you again. I told you that. You were working too hard. Now you can. Come home with us. You'll soon be all right.
My name, I said, is Edward Pinkhammer? I've never seen you before in my life. The woman cried out.
Oh, Ellen, I'm your wife.
She put her arms round me, but I pushed them away.
Oh, Dr. Volney, what is the matter with him?
The woman cried.
Go to your room.
The doctor said to her,
He'll soon be well again.
The man who was a doctor turned to me and said quietly,
Listen. Your name is not Edward Pinkhammer.
I know that. I replied, but a man must have a name. Why not Pinkhammer?
Your name
The doctor said,
is Elwin Belford. You are one of the best lawyers in Denver. And that woman is your wife.
She's a very fine woman. I said after a minute. I love the color of her hair.
She's a very good wife.
The doctor replied,
When you left 2 weeks ago, she was very unhappy. Then, we had a telephone call from a man who saw you in a hotel here.
I think I remember him. I said, he called me Belford. Excuse me, but who are you?
I'm Bobby Volney. I've been your friend for 20 years, and your doctor for 15 years. Elwin, try to remember.
You say you're a doctor. I said, how can I get better? Does amnesia go slowly or suddenly?
Sometimes slowly. Sometimes suddenly.
Will you help me, Dr. Volney? I asked.
Old friend.
He said,
I'll do everything possible.
very well, and if you're my doctor, you can't tell anybody what I say.
Of course not.
Dr. Volney answered. I stood up. There were some white roses on the table. I went over to the table, picked up the roses, and threw them far out of the window. Then I sat down again. I think it will be best, Bobby, to get better suddenly. I'm a little tired of it all now. Go and bring my wife Marion in now. But, oh, doctor, I said with a happy smile. Oh, my good old friend, it was wonderful.
Thank you for staying with us. Don't forget to subscribe the channel for more interesting stories.